Tonight on Bridge City News, NDP leader Rachel Notley was in Nanton and Lethbridge yesterday for more rallies. Lethbridge East and West candidates had their say at a large forum at the NMAC Centre last night. And federal Tory leader Andrew Scheer teamed up with UCP leader Jason Kenney for a Trudeau-Notley Slam Fest in Calgary last night.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. NDP leader Rachel Notley made a quick stop at Shannon Phillips' campaign office in downtown Lethbridge last night.
That this has been a different campaign than, for instance, the last one that I was in. But that's in part because the leadership has changed. And quite honestly, Mr. Kenney is a very different person from Mr. Prentice or Mr. Jean. And it's, you know, I know people get frustrated about it, but in my view, it's not mudslinging if it's the facts. And it is not only unprecedented in Alberta, but I think it's actually unprecedented in the country that you have somebody seeking the office of Premier while the very path to being in the position of candidate for Premier is being investigated by the RCMP.
Notley brought a message of solidarity with working-class Albertans before a crowd of several hundred NDP supporters. She also stood proudly beside her two local candidates, Phillips and Maria Fitzpatrick. Now, before making her way to Lethbridge, Rachel Notley stopped in Nanton as well. She stood alongside local candidate Cam Gardner, who spoke about how he plans on serving rural Alberta communities.
I've been doing a lot of work with government, local groups, and trying to get health clinics, school renovations, infrastructure, sewer plants, and rec centers in all these communities. Critically important to keep our small communities sustainable. Some places for the kids to recreate. We need critical infrastructure, and we need to create some of these communities. We need some critical jobs, and I intend to advocate for that hard, especially in Crow's Pass, Pecani, Pincha Creek, and help as well up in all those communities.
Gardner, along with UCP's Roger Reid and other candidates, were all present for a voters' forum yesterday and answered questions for an audience of over 400 voters. Federal Conservative leader Andrew Scheer and UCP leader Jason Kenney launched a volley during a snowstorm in Calgary yesterday at what they called the Notley-Trudeau Alliance.
We know the darkness that falls upon the province when you have a government in power that constantly makes it harder and harder for people to get ahead, that punishes hard work and success, and that attacks our natural resource sector. We know the damage that governments like that can do to a province, and that's why it's so important that Jason Kenney, the United Conservative Party, form government this Tuesday here in Alberta.
Folks, are you ready to get Alberta back to work in just 5 days? Are you ready to scrap the carbon tax? Are you ready to stand up to the special interests that are attacking Alberta? Are you ready in 5 days to end the Trudeau-Notley Alliance?
Candidates from both Lethbridge East and West ridings were given one final shot at answering questions at an all-candidates forum. Video journalist Naveen Day was on site at the event, which was organized by the Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce. He says emotions were intense both on the panel and in the crowd.
Last night's forum at the NMAC Centre drew a crowd that filled the room right to the back. 9 candidates representing their parties for both Lethbridge East and West ridings were in attendance, and many people lined up to the microphone to criticize and question.
Our MLAs have taken credit for the Cavendish plant here. A lot of that work was done long before we had an Orange government.
You've made some rather pointed comments towards the UCP candidates concerning they're not engaging in many public forums, to which I agree. However, I also think it's hypocritical that you make that comment being that you cancelled and exaggerated public consultations on Bighorn and used the RCMP to justify it.
Our heavily subsidized wind and solar energy was just about minimal. Well, it was just about nil.
We did nothing for the disabled Albertans, for the veteran Albertans, and for the pensioner Albertans. What are we going to do to make those Albertans, the ones that you ignored last October in your budget. What are you going to do to give them? What are you going to do to fight for those Albertans?
He wants to repeal the labor bill. Are they not Albertans? Are they not Canadians?
The candidates, however, were able to respond back, answer questions, and provide relevant information.
The new PST that's coming on, the GST, and the carbon tax, they're not needed. Albertans are already overtaxed to the limit.
The supervised consumption site has been a disaster for downtown.
The Alberta Party would remove the carbon tax for families, for nonprofits, for most businesses, and we would keep it on large emitters.
Our plan does center on bringing $75 billion in new investment that will create 70,000 new jobs over the next 10 years.
To tell the public that we are white supremacists and racist because we have conservative values undermines the dignity of public office and being an elected official.
Government's not supposed to be in the business of business. It's supposed to be setting clear guidelines.
For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
Devin Hargraves is the Liberal candidate for Lethbridge East. Now, one of the big issues he's concerned about heading into the provincial election is basic income for low-wage earners. He does not see this as a basic handout.
The basic income isn't to just give out free money. It's been proven that when people have income, it also allows them to help pursue higher education. It does allow for stay-at-home parents and things like that. So I think it's a great strategy. It will help combat homelessness. It'll combat mental health that comes from not being able to find work, and would be an incentive for people to get out there, get a job, and create more revenue.
Catch my full interview with Mr. Hargraves discussing basic income, along with his thoughts on the changing of our education system. That's coming up in the second half of our show. A lot of talk this election is how we can revive the oil and gas industry to get Albertans working once again. Now, one of the regions which has been hit hard by the recession has been the Medicine Hat area. Joining me now is Kathy Smith. She's the campaign manager for Drew Barnes, UCP candidate for Medicine Hat Cypress. Kathy, you've knocked on many doors in the gas city. What are the biggest concerns from voters?
The top concern is jobs and getting a pipeline. And the economy. Those are the big issues at the door. We have seen over and over young men who worked are not working now. And in Medicine Hat, the unemployment rate is 11%.
Now, you're formerly a Medicine Hat City Councillor. What are some of the municipal concerns?
They're seeing huge increase in their utility bill because of the carbon tax. And that is grossly unfair when the city of Medicine Hat owns their own utilities. That on top of, they should be getting the advantage of owning their own utilities, and that is not happening because of the NDP policy of the carbon tax.
Kathy Smith, campaign manager for Drew Barnes, UCP candidate for Medicine Hat Cypress. Thanks a lot for joining me today.
Thank you.
Just a reminder that Bridge City News will be live at 8 p.m. on Election Night Tuesday night, bringing you all of the results from across the province. Now, to make it easier for residents wanting to vote in the election next week, the City of Lethbridge is offering free transit on Tuesday. Drivers will place a free transit on Election Day sign over the fare boxes when transit service begins at 5:45 in the morning until 9 p.m., which is an hour after the polls close. The Winston Churchill High School Robotics Club is flying high after winning the regional title last weekend at the Canadian Rockies Regional in Calgary.
This is my second year with the FRC program, and FRC in general has really gotten me a lot more interested into STEM, engineering, and all the other aspects in robotics, and it has really opened up my world to so many other possibilities because we've been able to create something that 20 years ago would have seemed impossible.
With the win in the first Robotics Canada competition, students at Winston Churchill High School have qualified for the World Competition in Houston, Texas, April 17th through the 20th. With the weather warming up, police are urging drivers to slow down.
Driving 101 is be aware of your surroundings, right? Be a responsible, mature observant driver pay attention to the road conditions. Is there gravel still on the road, which there still is from the winter? Be mindful of the speed zones. If there's sun glare, how many vehicles are on the road in the downtown core or on Whoop-Up Drive or Mary McGrath Drive or Scenic. Those are all very busy roads, and extra care needs to be taken while driving on those roads. And as well as in residential areas, you need to be mindful of pedestrians, children playing, people crossing crosswalks. And speed obviously plays a large factor into that, because the faster you're going, your reaction time, seconds get taken away very, very, very quickly. And the least amount of time that you have to react is the more likely that a collision could happen.
Goodrich says the police are not just focusing on the penalties, the real factor is that people are losing their lives in collisions because of aggressive driving. Lethbridge police need our help locating a missing teenager. Stefan Chiefbody was last seen on March 21st. He lives in Lethbridge but also has ties to Brockett. He's 16 years old, 5 foot 10 inches tall, 120 pounds with short black and blonde hair. He was last seen wearing black jeans, a red shirt, and a black hoodie. He also likes wearing hats. If you've seen Chiefbody, give the police a call at 403-328-4444. A 48-year-old Lethbridge man has been charged with drug trafficking. Police released details today of a drug bust which took place on April 5th after they pulled over a driver who was driving a truck erratically downtown. Following a search of the vehicle, they found $12,000 worth of carfentanil, meth with a street value of $400, and just under $1,000 in cash. Jason Anthony Moran faces a long list of charges, including drug possession and trafficking. Moran made his first court appearance last week. Saskatchewan's highest court has reserved its decision on whether a young man who shot and killed 4 people and injured 7 others in 2016 should be sentenced as a youth or as an adult. Lawyers disagreed that the shooter, who's now 21, had a sophisticated plan when he went on a shooting spree.
There was no effort to disguise, there was no effort to escape, there was no plan to escape. He was confronted with the situation, reacted wrong to it. I just don't know how you could possibly describe this as a sophisticated plan.
There's a range of sophistication, I suppose. We can all imagine cases where there's more sophistication in terms of the planning, but the Crown made the argument at the sentencing, and the judge found as a fact, more importantly, that this was sophisticated, that everything he did leading up to the murders and what he did on that day were not the actions of someone who is immature or vulnerable or those kinds of things. They were all the actions of somebody who was adapting to a change of circumstances as it was coming and who had a plan.
Former Liberal MP Jane Philpott asked her former colleagues when the government will make a serious commitment to help relocate First Nations in Northern Ontario. The group has to deal with devastating flooding each and every spring.
Earlier this week, I received a call from Chief Leo Friday of Kasheshawan First Nation. 10 days from now, more than 2,000 people from this community will be forced to leave their homes in the annual evacuation process. The Chief is concerned about the resilience of the dike, and there are legitimate fears of severe flooding. Our country spends millions of dollars annually for evacuations and for repairing flood damage in homes. When can we expect a serious commitment to funding the relocation that the community has been asking for years?
Our commitment to long-term relocation plan has not changed. The member would know very well from her work as Minister of Indigenous Services and President of the Treasury Board the work that is underway to deliver on this commitment. We've made significant progress on priorities, such as the new modular school which will be built in the community in September. We're currently working with the First Nations to monitor the threat of flooding, conduct preliminary mitigation, and support them for a smooth transition to host communities.
Authorities say federal agents in Phoenix exchanged gunfire with suspects while trying to execute a felony arrest warrant connected to human smuggling. A woman in the suspect's vehicle was killed. 4 agents were taken to hospital.
I heard a screeching tires, then I heard a slam like somebody hit a tree, and then I heard bang, 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 bang. Wow. Yeah, it was crazy. Like it was 50 shots.
We just saw like there was a body laying in the road with a black shirt on, and they didn't, have any kind of vest or protection. And they were they weren't moving.
It's very disturbing. It's upsetting to have it. It's happening in the neighborhood, and it's just scary hearing the gunshots. So this is usually a very safe area.
A 20-month-old boy survived a 6-story fall from a suburban Seattle apartment window after the toddler landed on the roof of a parked car.
The maintenance guy for the building came by and told me, hey, you need to come down with me. There's been an accident. We asked him what was happening. And that's when I found out the kid had fallen on my car.
If the car wasn't there, it would have been pavement that the child would have fallen onto. And this would be a much different end.
Wow, talk about a miracle. Federal prosecutors described celebrity lawyer Michael Avenatti as a schemer who built clients out of millions of dollars, cheated on his taxes, and shuffled money between accounts and businesses to avoid being caught.
The charges now being alleged against Mr. Avenatti can be broken down into 4 general categories. First, wire fraud, related to the theft of millions of dollars from 5 clients, including a paraplegic man who agreed to a multi-million-dollar settlement, but has received only a fraction of the money despite the fact that Mr. Avenatti received the full settlement amount over 4 years ago. Second, tax fraud, including failing to file income tax returns for himself and his law firm. Third, bank fraud, including the allegations in the original complaint that Mr. Avenatti received 3 loans from a Mississippi bank based on applications supported by phony tax returns.
Avenatti was also charged with bankruptcy fraud. There's some great movies playing at the Movie Mill this weekend. Here is the owner of the mill, Len Binning, with another Movie Mill Minute.
Armie Hammer and Dev Patel star in our next film, Hotel Mumbai, a true story of the gripping experience that took place in 2008 when the Hotel Taj was taken over by terrorists.
Chaos has erupted in Mumbai with multiple bombings and armed gunmen rampaging through the city.
Let them in! Look, I don't think you understand. There's been an attack and we're not safe.
Well, 5 years ago, everything was awesome with the Lego Movie. And now we have Lego Movie 2, the second part. There's new villains aboard, but all your favorites are back in this animated film that's great for the family.
Once, everything was awesome. Now, everything is bleak.
Hey, Lucy! I brought you coffee!
Coffee. The bitter liquid that provides the only semblance of pleasure left in these dark times.
Oh my goshness, did I interrupt you brooding just now?
Not a bad day in the Windy City today, and a beautiful weekend is shaping up. I'll have a look at the weather forecast in just a moment. A cooler but mainly sunny day today. Tonight, just a few clouds rolling in with a low near +1. Tomorrow, increasing cloudiness and a high near 13 is expected. Slightly cooler on Sunday with a high of only 9. The clouds should clear out on Monday, bringing lots of sunshine and a high near 10. On Election Day Tuesday, more sun and a high near 12. A mixture of sun and cloud on Wednesday and a high of 14. Thursday, mainly cloudy, but a beautiful high near 16 is expected. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 12 and an average low of -2. The highest temperature in this state was recorded in 2004 at 24 degrees, and the record low was -14 in 1968. Sunrise was at 6:46, sunset at 8:18. Let's have a look at how tomorrow's shaping up across the country now. Victoria will have rain at 10 degrees, showers at 10 as well as being forecasted for Vancouver. Increasing clouds and 11 for Calgary on Saturday. A mixture of sun and cloud and 15 for Edmonton. Mainly sunny and 12 for Regina. Just a few clouds at 14 for Saskatoon. Sunshine and 9 is on tap for Winnipeg on Saturday. Mainly sunny and 14 for Toronto. A mixture of sun and cloud and 13 for Ottawa. Pretty much the same picture for Montreal tomorrow. Expect rain at 15 in Fredericton, New Brunswick. Showers and 13 in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Charlottetown, PEI will have periods of rain and 8. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect a mainly overcast day and a high near 7 degrees tomorrow. Walt Disney shares are rocketing to an all-time high in early trading after the company moved into the streaming arena. The Disney Plus video streaming service will roll out in the United States in November at a price of $6.99 per month. That is well below the $13 monthly fee charged by Netflix. It is being released in tandem with the blockbuster lineup of Disney films coming out this year, including Aladdin, Toy Story 4, Frozen 2, and The Lion King. Shares in Walt Disney were up 13% at the opening bell in New York at $129.85 a share. Southwest Airlines is removing flights with the troubled Boeing 737 MAX aircraft from its schedule through August 5th. The company did not specify how many flights would be canceled because of the new schedule. It removed the jet from service on March 13th following 2 deadly crashes involving other airlines. Regulators around the world have grounded the aircraft, and Boeing has been working to fix the plane's technical issues. Uber is forging ahead with its initial public offering of stock, even as it reveals it's the subject of a criminal investigation by the U.S. Justice Department. The San Francisco company disclosed the information as part of documents setting the stage for its stock market debut. Government authorities are looking for a cover-up of a massive computer break during 2016 that stole personal information belonging to millions of passengers and drivers. Other inquiries are looking into Uber's use of duplicitous software to dupe government regulators. Now, here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Lethbridge police need our help locating a missing teen. Stefan Chief Body was last seen March 21st. He lives in Lethbridge, but also has ties to Brockett. He is 16 years of age, 5 foot 10 inches tall, 120 pounds with short black and blonde hair. He was last seen wearing black jeans, a red shirt, and a black hoodie. He also likes wearing hats. If you've seen Chief Body, give the police a call at 403-328-4444. The Alberta election is coming up on Tuesday. Bridge City News will be live starting at 8 o'clock. Up next, we sit down and chat with one of the Liberal candidates in Lethbridge to talk about a provincial sales tax for our province. Hear Devin Hargrave's thoughts next. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. If you're looking for a new-to-you bike, come out to the Lethbridge Bike Swap at Exhibition Park's North Pavilion on Saturday, April 27th. Sell, buy, or donate a bike. Admission is $2 for adults, and kids 12 and under are free. Bikes can be dropped off at 9 a.m. Find all kinds of used bikes that are refurbished or can be purchased as is. For more information, visit albertabikeswap.ca. Come for a fun time and help support a worthy cause. The Kidney Foundation Southern Alberta branch is hosting a 3-kilometer and a 6-kilometer walk or run on Saturday, May 11th at Henderson Lake Park. The route is designed for walkers, runners, strollers, and participants with limited mobility. Register individually or as a team by calling 1-866-956-2724 or go online to kidneywalk.ca. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
The provincial election is coming up on April 16th. We want to provide an opportunity for the Lethbridge candidates to talk about their election platforms. Joining me now at the desk is Devin Hargraves, the Liberal Party candidate for Lethbridge East. Welcome to Bridge City News, Devin.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
So why don't you share with our viewers a little bit about who Devin Hargraves is?
Okay, I moved to Lethbridge back in 2011. I came from Fort McMurray. It was a great experience there, and I came down here for post-secondary. Very quickly got onto the Lethbridge College Students Association as Vice President Student Life. So I came on to plan parties and have fun with things like that. Turns out that's not what it was all about. We were in Edmonton very vigorously fighting the cuts the Redford government made to post-secondary institutions.
But you got to know Brian Jean a little bit, being up in McMurray, Newfoundland's third largest city.
Exactly.
Newfoundlanders working up there?
Had the opportunity to work for the family car wash.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wax on, wax off. Now, the Alberta Liberals have made some pretty bold election promises, and one of them is an HST, a provincial sales tax harmonized with the GST. Devin, Saying PST here in Alberta, HST, I don't know if that's going to fly.
I think what you're missing on that, though, is cutting income tax on the first 57,000. That's going to affect the vast majority of Albertans, and then it would not be increasing taxes, it's just shifting how they're generated. With that, it would result in an additional $1 billion of income from tourism.
Let's talk about this deficit and this debt with the NDP government. A lot of business owners I've chatted with, a lot of people are just outraged. It's just out of control. What are your thoughts? I mean, you have to make some cuts somewhere, but where would you cut?
I think our thoughts is that Alberta needs a government and representation that's both fiscally responsible, which we're not seeing enough of right now, but still socially progressive. We can't just cut or put freezes into place everywhere. But we can't just throw money at problems to fix them, which is what we're currently seeing. As far as cuts go, there's any number of things. Alberta is one of the largest providers of corporate welfare in Canada. We don't need to be spending over $3 billion on plans for oil by rail car. Business does sort itself out. That money could be better spent at services for Albertans. By putting so much money into that, well, they have a cap on oil production, it's not economically viable to be shipping oil out at this time.
UCP leader Jason Kenney has come out and said as soon as he becomes premier, if he becomes premier, he's going to repeal that carbon tax right away. A lot of business owners I've chatted with, they cannot stand that carbon tax. Even homeowners I've chatted with. You know, I looked at my recent gas bill, $43 for gas, $22 for carbon tax. You know, a lot of us are not happy about it. What's the Liberal plan regarding the carbon tax?
We do agree that we do need to have the carbon tax in place. And the reason why is we would make that revenue neutral, but it would be better administered by Alberta than canceling it here and having it administered by Ottawa.
Okay. What would you do specifically to help out local businesses in our city in Lethbridge?
We're looking at putting a 3-year freeze on taxes for small local business startups and things like that to help make it more viable. With cutting income tax for the majority of Albertans, people are going to have more money to spend as well. And when the economy prospers, so does the lives of Albertans, so does local business, and that's what we're all about.
And you know, a lot of small, medium-sized businesses employ like 75% of Albertans here, so it's pretty important to take care of those business owners, isn't it?
And most definitely.
Yeah. Now, what about, speaking of helping out the business owners, what about the business owners in and around Lethbridge's safe consumption and injection site, Arches? They say they've lost a lot of business since Arches opened. So how do you help out the most vulnerable in our city who are addicted to drugs, you know, opioids with the opioid crisis, but at the same time support these business owners?
We believe that the supervised consumption site is a key strategy in helping combat the current opioid crisis we're facing. With that said, it's just one step of many. We need to see more treatment, more detox, things like that. An Alberta Liberal Party government would declare an immediate health state of emergency on this opioid epidemic to allow intergovernmental departments to better cooperate to get this cleaned up across the province. It's not just affecting Lethbridge, it's affecting our province and even worse, our nation.
How about the potential of maybe moving it away from businesses? Maybe to a hospital perhaps, or maybe somewhere more remote? What are your thoughts?
That would be something that definitely could be discussed, but unlike the UCP, we're not going to start putting freezes on supervised consumption sites. They're in place, they've been proven to assist, and there's no need to cut funding like Kenny's good friend Doug Ford did in Toronto.
Now, what about the education system? Many teachers I've spoken with say we'd like to see smaller class sizes. What are your thoughts? What needs to change when it comes to our children's education?
That's a good question. That's a large part of our platform, pertains to education. A lot of teachers we've talked to at the doors, or grandparents of teachers, parents of teachers, are loving our platform on putting caps on classroom sizes. Let's reduce the size of classrooms, have that teacher giving more individual direct attention to the student, while bringing in educational assistants and other professionals as necessary for more one-on-one for students who need that.
What size of classrooms are they talking about? I mean, when I graduated from high school, it was around 50 students per per one teacher, right, in high school. So when I hear now 3840 is too much, I'm like, I had more than that when I graduated, right? Mind you, there was a long time ago when I graduated high school. So what are you hearing from teachers? What would they be comfortable with? 25 to 30 students per teacher?
We don't
with
have
some EAs?
We don't have the flat cap established yet, but it would definitely be done in association with teachers. Our promise to hire 2,000 new teachers came directly from the Alberta Teachers Association. We need to talk to the experts and the people who know what they're talking about on the matter.
Speaking of talking and education, Education Minister David Eggen has come out and saying that you know, he was going to cut funding to a lot of the single faith schools, the Christian, Jewish, Muslim schools, if they didn't support GSAs. So let me ask you something. If you're elected here, how will you support children who are most vulnerable, you know, with the GSAs, they need that place to be able to come out and want the support, need the support, but at the same time, support the ideologies of these single faith-based schools?
Yeah, that's
going to be a tough road, you know?
The Alberta Liberal Party is completely behind catching charter schools and private schools up to the standard that education's at in Alberta, as far as funding, as far as transportation for those students, and cutting school fees. With that said, we do believe that we do need to protect vulnerable youth. So we are in favor of GSAs, as well as the child deciding when to come out to their parent.
Yeah, some parents I've chatted with as well saying, why would a teacher get the opportunity to find out that my child has come out, but I'm the parent. You know, I've raised this child, I've nurtured, I've loved, and I've cared for this child. Why would a teacher know more about my child than I do? That's not fair. So how would you respond to that? Those parents who are not going to hurt or abuse their child if they come out, but want to love them where they're at. But you know, the teacher gets the opportunity to find out, but the parent doesn't.
Well, so, how is the teacher going to find out? From the child telling them?
Yeah, through the GSA, through school, right?
Then you would hope that those parents had that solid home base and relationship with their child, that child would feel safe to come out to them directly. What the whole thing we've been seeing is the UCP saying, leave it up to the teacher whether to tell the parent, is simply a party shirking responsibility on addressing the issues and taking a solid stance.
Now, the Liberal Party is also coming out with a sustainable healthcare strategy. Why don't you share with our viewers a bit about what that is?
Yeah, we're looking to keep funding and increase that for healthcare. For us, it's education, healthcare are some of the major proponents that we need to keep our province moving forward and solid for the future. We can't let those things fall into neglect. We can't freeze funding, and we need to stay on top of things before it gets too late.
How about seniors? We have a lot of seniors here in southwestern Alberta. They have a lot of issues as well. You know, I'm getting close to that age myself. Long-term care beds is one issue that's been talked about by Rachel Notley, your leader David Kahn, of course, Jason Kenney, and Stephen Mandel with the Alberta Party. So what would you do to be able to help a lot of our seniors?
We want to add another 2,200 long-term care beds. But with that said, the Alberta Liberal Party is focused more on preventative strategies, right? So mental health to help combat addictions down the road, medically, smaller classroom sizes to increase graduation. So as seniors, we would want to see implemented tax cuts for those who continue to live with a senior parent and provide care. Let's keep them in a healthy environment, and if they don't have to go into long-term care, all the better.
You know, a lot of seniors I've spoken with as well, they want to be able to stay at their home for as long as they can.
Yeah.
And feel that independence, right?
Definitely.
To support them. You know, maybe have somebody cut their lawn, shovel their sidewalks, maybe help with groceries or whatnot, but they want that independence, and that's pretty important too, isn't it?
It's very important. So definitely accessibility, making sure that there is care in place, as well as home care is a great strategy to help reduce just sending people to homes.
Now, the Liberals also came out with a controversial plan to introduce basic income for low-wage earners. Many see this as just a handout and discourage people from actually going out and getting a job. So how do you respond to that?
The basic income isn't to just give out free money. It's been proven that when people have income, it also allows them to help pursue higher education. It does allow for stay-at-home parents and things like that. So I think it's a great strategy. It will help combat homelessness. It'll combat mental health that comes from not being able to find work, and would be an incentive for people to get out there, get a job, and create more revenue.
So Devin, you've been knocking on some doors here so far?
Yep.
How many doors do you think you've hit so far?
I've lost count. That would be something for my...
Over 1,000 maybe?
I go, well over that.
Well over that, right?
I go where my campaign manager tells me, and...
So what are people telling you then when you're knocking on those doors? What are they frustrated with? Let's start with that.
In Lethbridge, we have so many parents. It's all about families, so that's whether that be about healthcare for senior citizens, whether that be children with developmental disabilities.
Maybe daycare as well?
Daycare, we're committed to expanding $25 a day daycare. And a very huge one, which has been very, very popular with both parents, seniors, and everyone in between, has been the classroom size camp.
Okay. What about getting more Albertans working? You know, a lot of people seem to have a plan for getting more pipelines built. You know, Jason Kenney says he's going to implement the NDP Bill 12 as soon as it becomes premier, if it becomes premier. Turn off the taps to BC. Is that a little extreme for you, or what do you think of that idea?
Well, that's very extreme. Where Mr. Kenney's platform seems based on lawsuits with the federal government. We're going to sue them over carbon tax. We're going to sue them over turning off the taps. That's going to be putting money into lawyers that could be better focused on Alberta. And who knows? I'm sure Mr. Kenney's got plenty of great lawyers out in Ontario that he can call on to fight the federal government, but that's not going to do anything to raise employment in Alberta.
They have quite the history too, Trudeau and Kenney, because Trudeau used to be Kenney's critic when Kenney was a member of the Harper team, right? So cabinet minister. So what about getting pipelines built? What is the Liberal plan? Because that's a big part of who we are, the energy sector here in Alberta.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. We've been calling, even before this election was called, on more accountability on where this pipeline's at. For us, it doesn't matter who's in government. We need a provincial government that can stand up to Ottawa and get answers. We do completely believe that we do need the proper consultations with our First Nations people to bring them in and include them on the project. And we're not seeing that happen in a time frame that's suiting the needs of Alberta. So in the meantime, as well as calling on this pipeline to be built and for accountability, we are wanting to invest more into the STEM programs. Let's diversify our economy by diversifying our workforce.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up because, I mean, here in southwestern Alberta, we're more agriculture based, right?
Yeah.
Calgary's more about the Calgary Red Deer, I guess, is more about pipelines, the energy sector. I mean, we have some as well here. So how can we diversify? Is it more green energy projects instead of putting all of our eggs in the energy basket? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, we can diversify with that. Another one we've got good feedback on has been tax cuts and credits for the film industry, which is great in southern Alberta. As I'm sure you're aware, we're right at the edge of the...
Fort McLeod has got another big motion picture with
happening
Kevin
right now.
Costner. That's right, yeah, shooting there.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I saw the pictures from there. It's quite the change they did to that town.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Now, part of the Liberal plan is to grant new revenue-generating powers to Calgary and Edmonton and less provincial oversight. Now, how would that actually work, though?
That would be officially recognizing municipalities as their own order of government. Whereas right now the province can step over those boundaries if and when needed. It would be putting more responsibility on the hands of people on the ground who know the issues.
Let me ask you something when you're door knocking, Devin, as well. The Liberals, the federal Liberals, are not too popular here in Alberta. You know, it's just interesting. So how do you try and distance yourself from the Trudeau Liberals saying, hey, that's the federal party, we are the Alberta Liberals, we don't really have a connection with them?
Well, I'm Devin Hargreaves. I'm my own individual. Our leader is David Kahn, and as I said, it doesn't matter to us who's in federally. We're going to stand up and we're going to fight for Alberta and what Alberta needs, and even more specifically, what Lethbridge East needs.
Now, some people say, well, the Alberta Liberals, I mean, you guys are, you know, provincially 2%. You know, it's almost like a fringe party. You know, it's the UCP, the NDP, it's a two-horse race. Notley and Kenney, the Alberta Party's got, you know, 8.5 points, and the Alberta Liberals are 2%. So how do you combat that? How do you say, we want to be relevant?
Well, we started this party back in 1905. We saw the NDP come from just a handful of seats to a majority government. It is possible. We've got great candidates. We're out there knocking doors and burning the rubber off our shoes. And it's this base of a good leader and great candidates that is going to win Alberta back over.
So if you're not elected, what's next for you after that?
I'm going to continue to advocate. I've been a strong advocate for Lethbridge for many years, since I moved here in 2011, essentially, and I'll continue to do that.
How about employment-wise? What are you going to be doing?
I'll go back to the same job I'm at now, which is in personal finance.
Is it? Okay,
yeah.
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Devin Hargraves, the Liberal Party candidate for Lethbridge East, thanks so much for joining me in studio today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me here, and to all your viewers, I would just want to encourage them to get out and be sure to vote.
That's right. Every vote will count. On behalf of all of us here at PCN, I'm Noel Roberts. The talk on Parliament Hill is the Justin Trudeau threat to sue Andrew Scheer over lying. Is it just an empty threat? To talk more about it and some of the other big stories coming out of Ottawa is our parliamentary reporter Ray Filion. Ray, is this more about just a distraction taking the focus off of Trudeau's troubles? Scheer is welcoming the lawsuit, so Trudeau will have to talk about SNC-Lavalin under oath.
Well, yeah, that was the big surprise of the week for me. I mean, why did Justin Trudeau send that legal letter to Andrew Scheer in the first place? I mean, the Prime Minister explained this week that, you know, in politics, there are lots of debates, but he says he wants to teach Andrew Scheer, the leader of the official opposition, a little lesson here that you can't say whatever you want. You can't lie to Canadians. But the problem is this threat of a lawsuit has basically allowed Andrew Scheer to keep talking about the whole SNC-Lavalin mess, which is something that Mr. Trudeau and his Liberals desperately want to turn the page on. They want to talk about something else. They've been trying to do that for weeks. They were on the cusp of achieving just that because no new facts have come out lately, but then boom, Mr. Trudeau sends that legal letter to his main political opponent, giving him a golden opportunity to keep talking about that. And that's exactly what happened throughout the week. The Conservative leader has been, you know, he was asking Mr. Trudeau one question: when are you going to take me to court? Because I really want this to happen. Please sue me. As you know, the Conservatives and other political parties have been demanding an independent inquiry or some sort of an inquiry into the whole SNC-Lavalin scandal. And if Justin Trudeau does go ahead with, if he does make good on his threat to take Mr. Scheer to court, well, you'd have a sort of independent investigation in a courtroom somewhere in Ottawa, presumably. But I don't think it's going to happen. Personally, I don't see Mr. Trudeau, the Prime Minister, making good on that threat. But of course, the Conservatives aren't letting that one go. They keep asking the Liberals, please take us to court.
Ray, Jane Philpott claims that the Prime Minister broke the law when he kicked her out of caucus. Now, did he?
Well, we're not going to have an answer to that question anytime soon because she asked the Speaker to rule on it. That was on Tuesday morning when she rose in the House of Commons to claim that the Prime Minister did break the law, the 2015 law that regulates Parliament, because there was no vote to expel her, to kick her out of the Liberal caucus last week. She says that the Prime Minister didn't have the right to kick her out by himself, although Justin Trudeau says he consulted with caucus at length before making that decision. But the ruling came down on Thursday morning. The Speaker basically said that he doesn't have jurisdiction over the way the Liberals and other parliamentary caucuses go about their things, go about governing themselves. And that request from Ms. Philpott actually prompted a lot of Liberals this week to ask a question, which is, why is she doing this? You know, she doesn't want to get back into the caucus. Why is she's just trying to be a burr in our shoes? I interviewed the former Liberal cabinet minister earlier this week, and she says she's doing this out of principle. She feels that her rights were breached, and it's a question of principle, not just for her, but for all other MPs. She claims that an MP cannot be kicked out of a caucus without a vote. She also told me that she's been approached by other political parties here on the Hill, which is not kind of surprising because last week after she was kicked out of the Liberal caucus, Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP, and Elizabeth May, the leader of the Green Party, both said that they're interested in having discussions with her to perhaps get her to join their political movement. So she wouldn't say who she's been talking with, but she says she's had some discussions and she's actively considering their offers to perhaps run under a different banner in the next election. So that's going to be very interesting to watch. She also told me during the same interview this week that the last few weeks have been very, very difficult for her, especially her relations with her former Liberal caucus colleagues, rather. Apparently, things have been very frosty, and she says she finds it very, very hard to deal with.
Yeah, I can just imagine it'd be very intense. Democratic Institutions Minister Karina Gould is not happy with social media platforms and have responded to her request for help. Tell me more about that.
Well, yeah, as you know, there was a report tabled earlier this week that says it's a report from the Communications Security Establishment, an update from a previous report they did back in 2017 about possible foreign interference in the Canadian electoral process. We're going to have an election here in Canada in 6 months' time. That report says it's very likely that foreign entities are going to try to disrupt our election in some way. And back in January, when the Democratic Institutions Minister held a news conference to announce that the Trudeau government was taking steps to try and prevent that foreign interference in our democratic process, she says that she was trying to get the social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter to cooperate. And this week, during another news conference, she said she's very disappointed with their response. She's basically accusing them of standing in a corner with their arms folded, doing nothing. She'd like them to share information, but she feels like they're not cooperating fully, and that they won't do so unless they're forced to do it. And she's actually considering legislating. Now, obviously, there are only 7 weeks of parliamentary work left here in the nation's capital before summer. So obviously, we're not going to see any sort of legislation to coerce those social media platforms in time for the next election.
Many Canadians are shocked that a company which had over $750 million in profit, Loblaw, was given $12 million, taxpayers' dollars, Ray, from the Liberal government. It's a story that's not going away. What are you hearing right now on the Hill?
No, it's not going away. As you said, the Environment Minister announced $12 million for Loblaw earlier this week, which is the largest grocery chain store in Canada. The money is to help the company fight global warming, replace some old fridges with newer ones so that they don't emit as much greenhouse gas. Loblaw is claiming that this grant will help them reduce their overall carbon footprint by 23%, the equivalent of taking off 50,000 cars, taking 50,000 cars off our roads. But the feds are getting a lot of criticism over this. As you said, Loblaw is a very, very profitable Canadian company, the largest chain in the country. It reported $221 million in profit just in the fourth quarter of the last fiscal year. And many people have also questioned the wisdom of giving a company like this, public subsidy to a company that has admitted to taking part in a 16-year conspiracy to fix the price of bread. So, yeah, very controversial announcement by the Trudeau Liberals. The government has said it's important to fight climate change and that they're simply putting their money where their mouth is, doing their part for the environment. But obviously, it's not sitting well with a lot of people in Canada.
Ray, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau blasted Andrew Scheer in QP recently about a Tory senator who questioned whether white supremacy is much of a threat in Canada. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, a Conservative senator from Quebec, his name is Leo Housakos. Earlier this week, he was questioning the Foreign Affairs Minister, Chrystia Freeland, at a Senate committee, and he suggested that white supremacy is not a significant threat to our way of life here in Canada, to our democracy. Freeland responded that she absolutely believes that white supremacists do pose a threat. She pointed, among other things, to the massacre in Quebec City in 2017, that deadly shooting at a mosque in Quebec City. And that whole controversy, which erupted the next day in the House of Commons, prompted Andrew Scheer to say he had spoken to Senator Housakos and to issue a statement that says he does believe that white supremacy is a problem in Canada, just like in other Western democracies. And Mr. Scheer also accused the Liberals of inflaming those threats to divide Canadians and score political points. Now, obviously, we're 6 months away from the next election here in Canada, so the rhetoric is getting a little out of hands, and we're not done, I'm afraid, hearing stuff like that. Everything is just being inflated right now on Parliament Hill, given that we're so close to the election.
Absolutely. Ottawa says it wants to crack down on people who are unfairly claiming refugee status in Canada. Ray, is it still a big problem?
Yeah, it is still a big problem. Since January 2017, over 40,000 people illegally crossed the border from the U.S. into Canada to claim asylum status. The government calls them irregular, not illegal, irregular asylum seekers. So they introduced in the budget bill that was introduced earlier this week a bill that says basically that anyone who comes into Canada that way, who has already filed a request for asylum in the United States, will be turned back. They're going to be sent back to the U.S. They say they don't want those people shopping for a country. What I do find ironic is the fact that this bill is actually part of the budget implementation bill. And I find this ironic because when they were in opposition, the Liberals used to complain about those massive budget bills that were introduced by the former Harper government. They said it was undemocratic, that those bills shouldn't exist because they include so many things that don't have anything to do with the budget. And now that they're in power, they're doing just that. And you have the opposition complaining that the new government is doing what they themselves used to do. So I guess for Canadians, it's hard not to be cynical toward politicians when you see stuff like that happening in politics.
Ray, a lot of the gun owners I've spoken to here on the prairies, farmers and ranchers, they're not happy about Bill C-71, lawful gun owners. Now, the new gun control bill is being debated in the Senate. Ray, not everyone is happy with some of the recent amendments.
No, not everybody is happy with some recent amendments that were introduced by the Tories in the Senate. They're calling, as you know, with this bill, the Liberals want to introduce more stringent controls for background checks and stuff like that, increased record keeping for retailers, which are making proposed changes that are making a lot of hunters very unhappy. Now, after a thorough study, the Senate Conservatives proposed a series of amendments which the independent senators are complaining are watering down the intent of the government legislation. So it looks like a showdown could be looming over this in the Senate right now. Mind you, the independent senators have a majority in the upper house, so chances are those proposed amendments will be defeated, but that's where things stand at the moment where Bill C-71 is concerned.
Now, it's hard to believe that the new trade deal between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico is still not ratified. Ray, what's the future of the USMCA?
Yeah, we're still talking about this many months after the new deal between Canada, the United States, and Mexico was signed during a big ceremony. The thing is still, the big issue is those much despised U.S. tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. They're still in place nearly a year after they were introduced by the Trump administration. And many people are calling on Chrystia Freeland and the Trudeau government at large to not have the USMCA ratified for as long as those tariffs are in place. And this seems to be the way the government wants to go. They say they don't want to reopen talks. Chrystia Freeland said this week that'd be tantamount to opening a Pandora's box. But, you know, those tariffs being in place, a lot of people say that's probably the only kind of leverage that Canada has left. The aluminum industry was complaining this week that the tariffs on Canadian aluminum products alone are costing the industry some $60 million a week. We're talking about a lot of money, a lot of jobs that are at stake. So, this whole thing certainly creates uncertainty. The fact that the agreement was signed, but still hasn't been ratified, is still not in place right now. Mind you, in the meantime, it's not the end of the world, because for as long as the USMCA is not ratified, it's the old NAFTA that still applies when it comes to commerce between the three countries. And a lot of people will argue that NAFTA was actually a better deal than the new USMCA.
A real somber moment in Ottawa. There was a rally on Parliament Hill marking the 10-year anniversary of Tori Stafford's murder. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, April 8th, 2009, 8-year-old Tori Stafford was abducted as she was making her way home after school. Her body was later found. 2 people were convicted for that despicable murder. And you'll recall last year we talked a lot about Terry Lynn McClintock, one of the killers who was not in prison anymore. She was spending time at a healing lodge in Saskatchewan, which is a place that has no fences. It's not a jail. It's not a prison. So there was a demonstration on Parliament Hill on Monday, on the day of the 10-year anniversary of that gruesome murder. Her father was there. Tori Stafford's father Participants called for longer and stricter jail sentences for violent offenders, and the weather was absolutely miserable here on Monday, so good on them for showing up, for braving the elements to be there.
Our parliamentary reporter, Ray Fillion, joining me once again from Ottawa. Thanks so much, Ray.
You got help.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless. Have a great day.